Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today we're back with another installment of Romance Week here on my channel. You know I love my romance comics to the point where I've made my own romance comic, and it ends on Kickstarter on Friday. It's Geek Love #1. And so to celebrate the end of the campaign for Geek Love #1, I'm showing off some of the cool romance comics in my collection, some offbeat stuff, some stuff you don't see that often, some of my favorite books. Yesterday, I showed off my collection of My Romantic Adventures from ACG, and I'm trying to steer away from some of the DC stuff, because obviously DC was sort of the elephant in the room, the 800-pound gorilla. And I've shown a lot of DC stuff over the years on here. Now, I've shown a lot of this stuff as well, but more sort of piecemeal. So today I'm going to be showing you a bunch of Marvel books. And then tomorrow I'm going to be showing off some Charlton romance. But today it's going to be all about Marvel. Just a reminder real quick, the link for Geek Love is in the comments down below. So if you want to get my romance comic, now's the chance, because it's only going to be on there for a couple more days. You can just click the link down below and get a copy for yourself. But one thing that's interesting about Marvel is that when they were called Atlas, like pre-Marvel days, before the Marvel Universe existed, they had a bunch of romance titles, tons and tons of romance. And what ended up happening is thus. They started phasing them out in favor of sort of monster books in the late 50s. But as a lot of you know, Marvel in the late 50s and early 60s were laboring under a very restrictive distribution deal, where basically they were only allowed to have like 8 titles at a time. Or should I say 8 titles a month, because the way they decided to get around the restriction is to do most of their books bi-monthly, so they could have 16 different titles and then stagger them 8 each month, so that on the stands, they would have twice as much space because they would have 16 titles instead of 8. So that's what they ended up doing, and it became a problem when they hit it off with all of the superhero books, because they didn't have space in their distribution schedule to put out the superhero books. So what happened is they started phasing out all of the non-superhero titles sort of one by one to replace them. And there was one pure romance comic still going. I say pure romance because they had Patsy Walker and Patsy and Hetty, which were sort of more like teen humor, even though they later became sort of more like soap opera stuff. They also had Millie the Model and Modeling with Millie. So they had multiple sort of again, sort of teen humor books that were adjacent to romance, but the only real romance comic they were still publishing when they became Marvel Comics as we know them was called Love Romances. And so I'm going to show you a couple issues of that. These are incredibly hard to find, so I only have a couple issues of it. And let me just start off by showing those two, and then I'll talk a little bit about the series, the other romance books that Marvel started later, once they had eased that restriction. So again, I only have a couple issues of Love Romances from the Marvel era. Now, as you can see, this is issue 100 of Love Romances. It's from the big 12-cent Circle era. I love the Circle 10-cent and Circle 12-cent eras. It's also got a cover by Jack Kirby. I'm not sure who's on the inks. It could be Coletta. This is kind of a fine inking style that could be Coletta. But the issues that I'm interested in from the series are just the ones from Marvel. It's not just the fact that they came out during the Marvel era, but we get this logo right at the end of the series. There's a different logo that I don't like nearly as much that they had right up until around the time Marvel Comics started. But also, at the same time where we get this new logo during the Marvel era, Jack Kirby sort of takes over as the cover artist and starts doing a lot of stuff. Now, there's a lot of great romance artists that were already working for Marvel at the time. Some of the all-time greats were working for Atlas. But it feels very Marvel to have Kirby, who originated the romance genre, working on the romance books. So those are the ones I'm interested in. It started, I think, around issue 96 when they started doing that. Right, it was sort of around when the Marvel era started. And the only issues that I have of the run so far is this one, 100, which is pretty beat up. The spine is split all the way down from the top, all the way down to the staple. But I also have the last issue, very hard to find. Again, not in great shape, better shape than that one, but it's issue 106. And as you can see, this is pure Marvel. Cover dated July 1963. So at this point we have the famous Marvel corner box up here in the corner with the Marvel logo on there, Jack Kirby on the art. And it says, "Were my suspicions correct? Was Liz really my sister, my enemy?" And then the woman is saying, "It's you. It's always been you. My own sister who tried to wreck my romances. But not this time, Liz. Do you hear? Not this time." And Liz is like, "What?" And then the guy in the background is like, "What did I get into this time?" So, last Marvel romance book for about 5 years. Well, more like 6. One thing that's really cool about having this is that, as I mentioned, in order to bring out they canceled these books, not necessarily just because of sales, but it was because they needed the distribution slots for the superhero books they were coming out with. So this is the last issue of Love Romances. There's another title called Gunsmoke Western that also came out the same month. I think issue 45 was the last issue. These two books were canceled at the same time. And if you jump forward 2 months on their distribution, you'll see the 2 books that replaced Gunsmoke Western and Love Romances were Avengers #1 and X-Men #1. So if it wasn't for Love Romances giving up that spot, we may not have had the Avengers, my favorite superhero book. We may not have had the X-Men. So that's just a kind of a cool trivia as a huge Avengers fan, is that Love Romances basically was canceled to launch Avengers. So I love having these. Obviously, I'm always on the lookout for more from that era, but they're very hard to find. When you do find them, they're often very expensive. So these I managed to get pretty good deals on, but that was the end of the Marvel romance for a long time. But in 1968, as most of you know, Marvel got out of that distribution deal. They got a new distribution deal, and they started putting out tons of titles. In 68, they started with a huge wave of all new superhero books. All the books, the split books, split off into 2 titles, and they put out a bunch of new stuff in 68. But shortly after that, there was another wave of stuff that was less superhero-y, and they put out a bunch of stuff that was like kids books, like reprinting some kids stuff from the 50s. None of those lasted more than a couple issues. You almost never see those. Like Homer the Happy Ghost, there's a few issues of that, whatever. But they also started a new line of romance comics, and their 2 books that came out were My Love and Our Love Story. And I have some of those here. Why don't we start with My Love? Okay, so we got issue #1, John Romita. Now, Romita, of course, one of the great romance artists, and did romance almost exclusively at DC for like 8 or 9 years. At this point, he was, doing Spider-Man, and was like one of the 2 or 3 big artists at Marvel, and had been there a while doing mostly superhero books. But when it's time to launch the romance books, they put him on the covers and doing some of the stories because he was so great at it. I won't be showing you Our Love Story #1, which he also did the cover of. That's a cover that it really looks like Peter Parker and Mary Jane on the cover. But when I did my video that was a tribute to Romita when he passed away, I took that book out of my collection, and I don't know where it is. It's in the pile somewhere, so I couldn't find it for this video. But we have My Love #1 right here. And pretty early on, you can tell by the logo, we also got this. and it's the My Love Annual, My Love Special #1, Queen Size Special. And this has this super dramatic John Buscema cover, right? So if you look at the, we got the woman, she was saying, "He'll never be mine, never," and she's like running off in a huff. But look at the guy in the surf. Just look how dramatic he is. Just standing there, legs akimbo, shirt open with his big bare chest, and he's just standing there like Poseidon in the surf. So we get this annual here. I'm going to jump ahead a few issues here. One thing that I have a particular interest in is the romance comics that have like women's lib covers, and here's a great one, issue 10, My Love #10. No man is my master. She's at this rally, female freedom, and she's saying to this guy, "I must leave you, darling, because no man is my master." And there's people with the women's rights and the equal rights. This is sort of exactly the kind of story that the male writers, which most of the people writing these stories were men, were putting out. Stories showing how insecure and afraid they were of the women's lib movement and equality. So there's a lot of covers that are like really men being really afraid that women aren't going to be interested in them anymore. One thing that's great about the Marvel romances, yes, we have classic sort of romance artists working on these books, like Romita, but you get a bunch of Marvel writers and artists that you know from the superhero stuff, but working on romance books, and you end up with some really cool stuff. For instance, a favorite of mine, I love the frame covers. As you know, the 20-cent frame covers, my favorite Marvel era covers. But here's something really cool. It's Alan Weiss doing a cover for My Love #17. And let me see if I can get in there so you can see. I mean, Alan Weiss is great, great detailing, line work, always very expressive. I'm a big fan of his art, so it's really cool to see him doing a romance comic. Here's issue 19, and I love the yellow covers, yellow frame covers. Just send me, man. So here's issue 19, My Love, Tales of Love That Could Be Yours. It's just so great. I mean, honestly, the yellow frame on this, it's so great. Here's 22. This is a semi-frame. This is from the couple months after the end of the frame where they were still doing the thing at the top. No, I won't marry you. Not now. Not ever. It's because I'm poor, isn't it? Answer me, isn't it? Is it? I don't know. I haven't read this one. But I do love the semi-frames almost as much as the full frames. A lonely girl cries out, "I'll never marry for love." There's another women's lib. Now, this is issue 31. By the time we're getting to this era here, so we're 25 cents, we're in the mid-70s now. So it's like 74 or whatever. These are now being reprints. So this cover and the story inside originally appeared in a previous issue. I think it was an issue of Our Love Story, but I'm not 100% sure. It wasn't the same one that I showed earlier. There's a different women's lib story. So a lot of these, and I'm going to show you this in a minute because I do have two versions of the same cover here. A lot of like my favorite covers in this run, actually there's two different versions of them, the original and the reprint version. And again, I'm going to show you in a second the contrast between them. So let's start looking at Our Love Story. Here's issue 2. Like I said, I have issue 1, but I don't know where I put it. But here's issue 2, another great Romita cover. In some ways I like this better than issue 1, actually. Here's issue 5, which also has a Romita cover, but is most famous because it has an absolutely tremendous story from Jim Steranko in it. In fact, I'm going to pull it out so you can see that, because if you've never seen the Jim Steranko romance comic, you've got to look at it. Check out these awesome psychedelic panels and storytelling from Jim Steranko. You really have to hold this and go through it to get the full sort of appreciation for the fantastic art. But check out like some of these sequences here with this style, which is not really Steranko's usual style. He's very much leaning into this sort of psychedelic art style. And it's absolutely great. It's great. This used to be a really big key back when people cared about actually reading comics. It's not as big of a key now because everything's so cover driven. But it's just absolutely tremendous work from Steranko. And again, they have like all their best romance people working on this. So the other stories in here is John Buscema, Gene Colan doing stories, and of course Colan did a ton of romance stuff for DC. So it's just great. Now here's one of my favorite covers. I'm going to show you 2 versions of it. It's so dramatic, and I love the coloring on both versions. Here's issue 15, the original version. I just love it with the dramatic lines, and then this couple here. There's no other way. No, you can't leave me, you can't. And then these hands coming from off panel to pull them apart. It's so super dramatic. It's like pop art. You know, Roy Lichtenstein could only dream of doing something like this. It's just fantastic. And then just 13 issues later, in the same title, they reprinted the story with the same cover, but with completely different coloring. Now, I also love the coloring on the new version. I go back and forth about which one I like better because I kind of like the yellow background here. And when the yellow background, it necessitated changing her hair color as well from blonde to redhead. But I like the framework here better, and the logo and the trade dress all better here. So I don't know, man. I love both of these. Tell me, what do you guys think? Do you like this one better? Do you like this one better? Let me know. This is 15. This is 28. So 15 or 28, which one do you like? Either way, one of my favorite covers from Marvel's romance books, and I'm really happy that I have both of them. Here's another yellow frame cover, there's a signature. We got a signature, everyone, and I think it might actually be another Alan Weiss. It's another Alan Weiss cover, although it's inked by someone. Doesn't look as Weissy. Anyway, here it is, issue 20. I love the yellow frame, but I also love this logo. Like, it's great. It's so perfect for the time. It's of the time, and yet it still feels a little bit modern. So I love this design. Absolutely love it. And then finally, last book. It's Our Love Story number 31. Another frame cover. Looking for a signature. I don't see one. Afraid to Love. This logo is not nearly as good as that other one. Not even close. It is interesting that they're, like, on this logo, they're highlighting Our Love with a little story. It's interesting because Love Story was such a big movie in 1970. It actually makes a little more sense to highlight Love Story. So I'm not sure why they didn't do that earlier, but just from a design perspective, I much prefer the other logo. But here it is, issue 31. Now, both of these series ended, forget exactly what number, 36, 38, around there. So they ran until like 75 or 76 and they canceled. But by the end, they were pretty much all reprinting earlier issues of the same run. Now, some of those reprints, though, also actually had stuff from their Atlas days. And so a couple of the late issues of those runs have Matt Baker stories from when he was working at Atlas at the end of his career. So not like the really famous stuff from St. John's, but he did a bunch of work for Atlas in the late 50s, just before he passed away. And some of these late issues of Our Love and My Love have some of his stories reprinted in those. So if you want to get a cheap Matt Baker, these aren't that easy to find, but when you do find them, they're much cheaper than the originals from the 50s. So anyway, there's a look at some of the Marvel Romance. I hope you enjoyed looking at those. Again, tomorrow I'll be talking about Charlton and showing off some Charlton Romance books. And again, you click on the link down below to check out my romance comic, Geek Love, which is sort of my love letter to all romance comics. I'm really excited to get that out there. So thanks very much. I'll see you next time.